Today, we are exposing 3 revolting Australian steakhouse experiences you need to think twice about, and 3 legitimate places where a steak is still treated like real food, not a prop on a plate. Stay with me to the end, because I will not only name names, I will also give you a simple steakhouse checklist you can use anywhere in Australia to spot a fake premium steak before it hits your table. We have been sold a fairy tale about steakhouses. Big menus with photos of perfect grill marks. Slow cooked for 18 hours. Famous for our ribs and steaks. The story is simple. You pay top dollar. They cook a beautiful bit of Australian beef. Everyone walks out happy. But here is the part nobody talks about. Behind that glossy menu, a lot of chain steakhouses are serving tough, lukewarm, badly cooked steaks that angry diners say would not pass at a cheap public house. Charging $30 to $50 or more for meat that some reviewers describe as mostly gristle and fat, or not even the cut they paid for. Relying on sugary sauces, heavy marinades and seed oil fried sides to hide mediocre beef and inconsistent grilling. Meanwhile, the place is quietly doing steak properly, dry aging, pasture sourcing, actually caring about the grill, often do not scream at you from billboards. So let us pull back the curtain. We will start with 3 steakhouses where real Australian diners are reporting some genuinely revolting experiences, and then finish with 3 that prove steak in Australia can still be world-class when it is done right. Number 1. Hogs Breath Cafe, when famous 18-hour steak becomes a running joke. Hogs Breath is one of those names every Australian recognises. Cartoon pig, surf shack vibe, famous for 18-hour slow-cooked prime rib. On paper, it should be a safe choice. But the reality in recent years, according to Australian diners, is brutal. On product review, Hogs Breath Cafe sits at 1.6 out of 5 stars from 149 reviews, with complaints about tough, cold and even foul-smelling steaks coming up again and again. One reviewer described paying $30 to $40 for 200 grams of meat and getting a steak that was absolutely terrible, tough as leather, with chunks of fat on the edges, and said an average public house steak or even a racetrack steak sandwich was better than this rubbish. Another customer ordered multiple 18-hour rib steaks and a steak sandwich and said there was a distinct stench from the steaks, while the steak sandwich was described as rancid, the kind of smell you remember for the wrong reasons. Others complain about meals arriving stone cold at the table and being taken away to heat up, vegetables still cold and undercooked even after reheating, and steaks that were supposed to be medium coming back burnt to a crisp with actual charcoal on them. TripAdvisor reviews for individual locations echo the same pattern: steaks served barely warm, cooked to the wrong doneness, and feeling like they have been sitting in the window for too long. On Reddit, Australians say Hogs Breath has gone downhill over the last decade and now feels like overpriced average food that might be the next steakhouse chain to fold. So what does that actually mean for your plate? You are often paying prime steak prices for inconsistent cooking, questionable freshness on arrival, and a product that many diners feel is worse than what they can cook at home. The branding suggests iconic Australian steakhouse, legendary 18-hour steaks. The recent diner feedback in a lot of locations sounds more like a place where you roll the dice on cold, grisly meat and hope this is not the night it is your table's turn. And if you think that is just Hog's Breath, wait until you see what people are saying about another big name in the steak and ribs game. Number 2, Ribs and Rumps, Rockhampton. Big prices, small portions, murdered meat. Ribs and Rumps sells itself as a serious meat destination. Huge plates, caveman branding, perfect for a big night out, right? Take the Rockhampton location as one example of how this brand can go wrong. On TripAdvisor, it sits at 3.4 out of 5 from 573 reviews. Not a disaster, but not what you would expect from somewhere charging premium steakhouse prices. Recent reviews are savage. One diner titled their review, "How could anyone get it so wrong?" describing a chaotic restaurant and a manager who had lost control. They say their Scotch fillet was, in their words, not Scotch fillet, tough, tasteless, and very badly cooked, while their partner's 200-gram sirloin was 100 grams of gristle, adding that they did not know how a chef could murder meat so badly. Another reviewer called it poor, cooked and overpriced, saying they spent around $160 for the family and got steaks that were poor quality and tough, bland vegetables, and portions that felt small for the price. And they flatly stated that every single public house dinner back home rated 100% better. A customer who ordered 500-gram beef ribs for $42 said they were terribly tough to eat, and that their side of greens was laughably tiny, about a quarter of a carrot, 2 slices of cucumber, and a piece of broccoli. So, what is going on here? On the surface, it looks like a destination steakhouse, big menu, big cuts, big prices. Underneath, a lot of diners feel they are paying for cheaper or poorly butchered cuts passed off as Scotch or sirloin, overcooked and underseasoned meat, and upsized bills for undersized sides. This is what happens when steak becomes just another line item in a high-volume chain. The story is all about ribs, rumps and huge servings. The reality, for too many customers, is tough meat, inconsistent cooking, and prices that make you wish you had gone to a local public house bistro instead. And if you think paying even more automatically gets you consistency, our third revolting pick shows how some big-name grills can swing from outstanding to disappointing from table to table. Number 3. Hurricane's Grill in Sydney, when premium feels like a coin toss. Hurricane's Grill is a well-known name in Sydney for steaks and ribs. Tourists line up. Locals recommend it. It looks and feels premium. On TripAdvisor, the Sydney Central Business District restaurant scores 3.9 out of 5 from just over 200 reviews. Respectable, but not bulletproof. And the split between glowing praise and deep disappointment is exactly what worries a lot of steak lovers. On the positive side, many diners rave that steaks were cooked to perfection, succulent and tender on consecutive nights, portions were generous without being wasteful, and sauces and sides were on point. But scroll a little further and you see a different story. One reviewer complained that a Scotch steak for $55 was very grisly and severely lacking for that price, and said the ribeye came on a huge plate with the smallest sample of meat, leaving them sure the steaks did not weigh what was advertised. Another customer, expecting flavoursome dark meats, said the beef ribs were tender but almost flavourless, with the sauce doing all the work, while the meat itself was bland and unseasoned. They described sides like macaroni and cheese and onion rings as uninspiring and devoid of flavour, though they noted the chips were outstanding, which says a lot about where the effort may be going. So what does that mean in practice? You can sit down next to a table having one of the best steaks of their lives, while your plate lands with underweight grisly meat and forgettable sides for the same price. The branding and prime harbour locations suggest top-tier grill house. You are in safe hands. The mixed reviews suggest something else, a restaurant where the gap between the best and worst plates is so big that your $50 steak can feel like a gamble. Taken together, these 3 examples show a bigger pattern. Chain steakhouses lean on big marketing, big menus and sugary sauces. But when you drill into real diner experiences, too many are failing at the one job that matters, buying good beef and cooking it properly. So where do you go if you actually care about the steak, not the sizzle? Now let us talk about the Australian steakhouses that are actually worth your time. Number 4, Kingsley's Steakhouse in Sydney. Pasture-fed, dry-aged and treated like a craft. Walk into Kingsleys in Sydney and you immediately get a different feeling. Shorter menu, less gimmick, more focus. A detailed review of Kingsleys describes ordering a Haverick's dry-aged rib on bone, pasture-fed from New South Wales, 400 grams, finished with a roast garlic and thyme butter. That is not just menu poetry, it is real sourcing detail. They are buying from Haverick Meats, a high-end supplier known for dry-aging whole primals. The beef is pasture-fed in New South Wales, not a mystery import. The cut is dry-aged, meaning it is hung in a temperature and humidity-controlled room. So the exterior slowly dries, enzymes tenderize the meat, and the flavor becomes more intense and nutty over time. The reviewer explains that dry aging breaks down the meat over time, increases tenderness, and develops that deep, savory flavor you simply do not get from a vacuum-packed supermarket steak. From a plate perspective, that matters because you are paying for actual beef quality and technique, not just sauce and portion size. The fat renders properly, the crust forms from real Maillard reaction, not sugar in a marinade. On the menu, it looks like dry-aged rib on bone, pasture-fed, from New South Wales. In your mouth, it feels like a steak that someone has thought about from farm to butcher to grill, not just something thrown on the plate to justify a price tag. And if you think Kingsley's is just a one-off fancy spot, Number 5 shows what happens when a serious restaurant group builds an entire steak experience around pasture-to-plate Wagyu. Number 5. Rockpool Bar and Grill. Pasture-to-plate Wagyu and serious dry aging. Rockpool Bar and Grill in Sydney, Melbourne and Perth is not cheap. But there is a reason it is on almost every best steak in Australia list. Rockpool has announced an exclusive partnership with Pure Wagyu, a producer raising Wagyu cattle on Tasmania's pristine pastures. On their own site, they explain that Pure Wagyu cattle are raised in a region known for clean air, high rainfall, and lush natural pastures. The herd is managed with ethical farming practices and meticulous traceability. The cattle graze on those pastures and are matured to an age that maximizes marbling and flavor. Rockpool then dry ages these premium primal cuts in-house, cooks them over wood-fired grills, and builds the whole menu around showcasing that marbling and depth of flavor. They describe this as a pasture-to-plate approach. You're not just getting a random Wagyu sirloin, you're getting a specific farm story, a controlled aging process, and a grill program tuned to that exact beef. From a real food perspective, that checks a lot of boxes. Transparent origin, respect for the animal and the cut. Minimal need for gimmicky sauces or sugary glazes because the steak itself carries the meal. You still need to watch portion sizes and sides. It is rich beef, usually cooked with plenty of butter or oil. But if you are going to blow the budget on steak, this is what it looks like when a restaurant treats beef like a craft, not a prop. And if you are thinking, that is great, but I am not dropping Rockpool money every week, number 6 is where serious steak meets something closer to normal person life. Number 6. Modern Australian steak bars. Dry-aged, Australian-sourced, actually accessible. In the last few years, a new style of steak venue has popped up in Australia. Smaller menus, fast service, still serious about beef. Time Out's 2026 list of Sydney's best steak restaurants highlights a venue from the Bistecca team, offering a 220-gram riverine sirloin, dry-aged on-site in a butchery at the back of the room, and grilled on a custom-made steak grill. They promise your steak will arrive in around 15 minutes, blackened on the outside thanks to that fierce grill, and cooked properly inside. Another featured steakhouse on the same list is praised for sourcing prime cuts from Australian producers like Jack's Creek, the Australian Agricultural Company, and Ranges Valley, aging that beef in-house for 6 to 12 weeks to deepen flavour, and offering pasture-fed tenderloin, grain-fed ribeye and black Angus sirloin, all cooked with proper sauces like Diane or Café de Paris butter. A third is noted for having an entire menu section just called Land, with meat dry-aged on site that you see in the cabinet as you walk in. Why does this matter? Because these places prove you can eat steak that has been properly aged and sourced from named Australian farms in casual or modern dining rooms without needing a corporate expense account. They are still a splurge compared to a cheap public house. But the gap between them and the worst chain experiences we looked at is enormous in transparency, technique, and respect for what is on your plate. The pattern you cannot unsee. Look back at all 6 of these steakhouses, and a clear pattern appears. On the revolting side, you see chains leaning on branding and nostalgia, while diners report cold or lukewarm steaks, tough grisly cuts, rancid smells, overcooked meat, and underwhelming sides, and high bills for meals many customers say are worse than a decent public house bistro. On the legitimate side, you see named suppliers like Havericks, Pure Wagyu, Jack's Creek, the Australian Agricultural Company and Ranges Valley. Clear claims about pasture-fed or carefully managed grain-fed beef in house-dry aging for weeks to build flavour instead of relying on sugary sauces, and wood-fired or custom grills designed around the meat, not just mass production. Zoom out one more step, and it taps into everything we have seen across Australia's food system. The cheap, high-volume model leans on industrial supply chains, lower grade cuts, heavy sauces and ultra-processed sides cooked in seed oils. The real food model focuses on fewer dishes, better ingredients, and simpler preparation that lets the meat speak for itself. So the real question is not just which steakhouse, it is what kind of steak culture are you rewarding with your money? Now let us talk about the simple moves that actually protect your steak. You do not need a food science degree to pick a good steakhouse. You just need to stop falling for the same traps. Use this simple checklist next time you are choosing a place for steak in Australia. Check the sourcing on the menu or website. Do they name the farm, region or producer, such as Havericks, Ranges Valley, Jack's Creek, Pure Wagyu or specific New South Wales or Tasmanian regions? Or is it just premium steak with no origin? Look for dry aging, or at least in house butchery. Proper steakhouses brag about dry aging for 4 to 12 weeks and often show you the cabinet. Chains that never mention aging are usually just cooking commodity, wet-aged beef as fast as possible. Scan recent reviews for patterns, not one-offs. Everyone gets a bad night. But if you see pages of tough, grisly, lukewarm and overpriced, believe the pattern. Watch the menu size. 10 different cuts, ribs, burgers, pasta, seafood, nachos and more. That is a factory. A tight list of a few steaks done well is usually a better sign. Be honest about how often you eat steak out. Even the best steakhouse is still rich food. You are better off going less often and choosing somewhere legitimate than eating low-quality steak because it is cheap every week. Final message and call to action. Steak in Australia used to mean something simple. You saved up. You went somewhere that respected the animal, the farmer and the grill. You got a plate that was about beef, not brand slogans. Now, a big slice of the steak scene has drifted into chains with cartoon mascots and famous dishes that real diners say arrive cold, tough and badly cooked, menus that hide mediocre meat behind marinades, sugary sauces and piles of chips, and bills that make you wish you had just bought a good ribeye and cooked it at home. But at the same time, there are still Australian steakhouses quietly sourcing from named local farms, dry aging on site, cooking over real flames, and serving steak that actually honors the animal and your money. You do not have to cut steak out of your life. You just have to stop rewarding the places that treat it like a microwaved prop and start supporting the ones that still treat it like real food. If this video helped you see the difference between revolting and legitimate Australian steakhouses, tap like so more people stop wasting good money on bad meat. If you want more deep dives that protect your plate, your health and your family from the quiet tricks of Australia's food industry, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. That is how we keep this series going. Now tell me in the comments, which steakhouse shocked you the most today? The famous chain with rancid reviews, the ribs and rumps joint with murdered meat, or the pricey grills that feel like a coin toss? And what is your next move? Saving up for a proper dry-aged steak, learning to cook a killer ribeye at home, or finally breaking up with that chain you have been tolerating for years?